Good morning, everyone. This is Father Peter Kazmarek once again, coming to you from St. Francis of Assisi Parish in Greenlawn and sharing, hopefully, timely thoughts with you about our season of Advent and also about some of the personalities that the liturgy allows us to deal with and helps us and sustains us in this time. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about a particular saint whose feast day comes up during Advent, and he is generally not, so to speak, on the mainstream of the Advent, let's say, order of business. You know, we want to deal in Advent with Isaiah the prophet and understand those magnificent passages from his prophecies about the coming days of peace and the days of the Messiah. The lion shall lie down with the lamb. The little child will lead them. They'll turn their swords into pruning hooks and their spears into plows. And the other things that we have John the Baptist. Are you he? The famous question that John asks of Jesus: are you he who is to come, or shall we look for someone else? And of course we probe the depths of his great holiness, John the Baptist, and understand his unique place in the history of salvation. And then of course really the prize of all, in the last week of Advent, we focus on Mary, the mother of Jesus, and of course the Incarnation, the Annunciation, the various other events, and then St. Joseph gets a minor role, of course. Well, he really should, I suppose, get a bigger one, but he also is included in our roster of great Advent personalities. So we have so much to enrich our spirituality just in thinking and contemplating about Isaiah, about John the Baptist, about Mary, of course, and about St. Joseph. But that all said, here and there you have some other special feasts. You have the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and of course it gives us a chance in studying the Immaculate Conception also to think about our own country, the history of Catholicism in this country, and of course around the time that the bishops were meeting frequently in Baltimore, those famous councils of Baltimore in the middle of the 19th century, the dogma of the Immaculate Conception was defined. All right, and they declared that that Mary was conceived without sin, preserved from every stain of any effective original sin, in light of the fact that she would be the mother of our Savior, so that no stain of sin would touch her. As Gerald Manley Hopkins put it, our tainted nature's solitary boast. It's a wonderful line. It's a wonderful poetic line. It sums it up really, the Catholic attitude toward the Blessed Mother and toward her Immaculate Conception. That feast comes up during Advent too, December the 9th. It comes up, right as we're beginning Advent. And then, of course, we have the minor theme of rejoicing. We just celebrated Gaudete Sunday, and we were able to get it this year through a nice donation, another set of the rose vestments. Someone had given us another set of rose vestments, but it included the crown of thorns. And, well, that set of rose vestments that would be suitable for Lent. All right, suitable for, but not really for Advent, because we really have so much on our plate already. So we have here at the parish of St. Francis now, we have then a new set of the rose vestments. But all of this really, also is on top of some of the other great saints. We celebrate St. Nicholas, for instance, and so forth. But really the saint that I wish to share a little bit more at length with you is John of the Cross. Now, John of the Cross really is, so to speak, off the spectrum, if you want to say, of Advent, strictly speaking. But we have that sanctoral cycle of feasts, and we also have the opportunity to understand a little bit more better our contemplative tradition of prayer in the Church. Now, a lot of people confuse the relationship between St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross. John of the Cross was not St. Teresa's spiritual director. He was a younger man, and she recruited him at a convocation that was being held. She was interested in reforming, of course, the female branch of the Carmelite order, and John of the Cross was restless in his role as a Carmelite friar, and was thinking that he wanted even more austerity and more silence and more of the hermit life than he would be allowed in the Carmelite order at that time. So Teresa approached John of the Cross and didn't mince any words at all. She said, "I think God is telling me to tell you to get involved in what we're involved in and reform the men's branch of the order too." So they started out with a bang. And in a short 2-year span, they had 4 houses of the reform going, and it looked like it would be catching on. Then, of course, there was that backlash that occurred where many of the friars who were called of the mitigated observance, they call them the mitigated friars, some of the original rule was that they would dispense from that, got very angry with John and on trumped up charges had him tried, arrested, tried, and convicted. And he was sentenced to, I guess really it turned out to, it would have been a number of years, to imprisonment in a church dungeon, in a church-run prison. And you might say, this is a very strange thing. What was the church doing in the prison business? Well, here's the story. In places like Spain in the Middle Ages and up until modern times, where the Catholic Church was recognized as the official church of the country, well, clerics were often exempted from civil jurisdiction. So if a cleric was accused of a crime, he would be able to have his case heard in a church court, in an ecclesiastical court, rather than be exposed to the vagaries, so to speak, of local justice at that point in time. What kind of justice a cleric could get from a local baron's court or a very local place, they weren't sure. So they usually negotiated clauses that clerics would be tried in special courts. Well, he was condemned, and he was put in a prison run by the mitigated Carmelites, and looked like it might have been curtains for him. St. Teresa, to no avail, was trying to get him out, but it didn't work. However, as destiny would have it, John of the Cross was a very observant man. He observed the certain points of carelessness about the jailer. He got to know his movements, his timing, and so forth, and was able to perpetrate an escape. He let himself down the classic way by tying bed sheets together, okay, and let himself out the window of the castle. Had to take a little drop too, but he managed to come out unscathed, and he got away. And he never came back to that section of Spain again, but on the other hand continued to have a fruitful life of reforming the various male branches of the order. And of course the two branches of the Carmelite order exist today. And they're more on friendly terms than they were when it started. St. Teresa, of course, went on to have a very difficult role of being prioress of the great unmitigated or mitigated convent in Avila itself. Now, the thing is this, that St. Teresa's reforms really cut at the heart of it. That what happened with the Carmelite order is it kind of lost its bearings, it lost its focus. It's not that all of the women there were wicked or evil or sinful or anything, but the rule, the mitigated rule, allowed for a lot of personal freedom, and there was a lot of noise in the convent, so to speak. They entertained a lot of visitors. People were able to the sisters were able to have longer periods of recreation, so to speak, and there was a lot of chit chat going on, and I guess less of the contemplative atmosphere that St. Teresa so longed for and so cherished. So also the convents were very, very large. Remember, in the days of Catholic faith, being very, very much tied in with the culture, very tied in with practically with people. The convents were full of young women whose marital prospects were not the greatest. Okay, and at a certain point in time, if the family was not able to marry off a girl, they would try to persuade her to join a convent, at least for a while, until maybe the scene looked a little better. So with young folks like this, trying to battle with themselves, should I take vows, should I not take vows? You can imagine that the life of the Carmelite sisters there in the monastery was a little chaotic, a little more than a little topsy-turvy. Also, of course, people who were donors and friends of the convent, demanded time from the sisters, and oftentimes that involved, that they would be absent from choir and from the other required observances of worship that the sisters were involved with. So you see, then St. Teresa was made the prioress of Incarnation Convent in Avila, the biggest one, and tried to do something with that. And then she needed John of the Cross on another level, and various institutional arrangements made it possible for John to become the rector or the headmaster of a new college that they were founding, Alcalá, and get a position where he could have leverage over the sisters also and carry out the reform. Well, we don't need to give any more history at this point, because we really want to focus just on one famous line from John of the Cross. He was a great poet also. His poetry appears in Spanish literature books. It's kind of interesting how different cultures seem to have high points and then it seems to step off center stage. The 16th century was Spain's big century. Just at the end of the previous century, Columbus had discovered America, working for the King and the Queen of Spain. And what happened was in 1492, not only was Columbus discovering America, but at the last of the Moorish kingdoms in Spain. Remember, the Moors had invaded Spain in the 700s, in the 8th century, conquered most of it except for a little string of principalities and kingdoms up along the Pyrenees Mountains and in the Basque country. But there was a 700-year crusade going on, and little by little those kingdoms pushed the Moors back. And in 1492, the very last of the Moorish kingdoms, Granada, fell to the Christian armies. It looks like it was probably, looking back, it was an awful mistake. But on the third important thing that happened was that in 1492, the Jewish community was expelled from Spain. And of course that, I guess they were looking for a purity of faith and so forth, but certainly not the thing we would do today by any means. But it pointed out their seriousness, but also the mistake of perhaps going too far in your zeal. But in any event, it launched a tremendous century of creativity. Then Spain colonized the New World, and of course the wealth of the country, most of the Aztec gold, the Inca gold, and so ended up back in Spain, ended up decorating parts of cathedrals and making sacred vessels and so forth. But in the meantime, not only was this material expansion going on, but then also there was the rebirth of culture. Cervantes is alive at this point in time. It was considered one of Spain's great authors. And of course, the commentary on mystical prayer reached its height with Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. Two very different kind of mystics, by the way. One was a very emotional and feeling-laden mystic. That would be St. Teresa. I'd recommend, if you do ever get a chance to make a pilgrimage to Rome, that you visit that special church that contains Bernini's statue of Teresa in ecstasy. Certainly here was a woman who put her whole heart, mind, soul, and emotions into her prayer. Okay, John of the Cross was more cataphatic, more the dark night of the soul. You don't see too much. And as a matter of fact, you don't experience too much. And that's precisely what the dark night is all about. The dark night is a time of purification. What the mystics do is they try to lead a person to reflect on how God is dealing with them in terms of the graces that he's giving them during the time of prayer. And of course, there's that stage in our spiritual growth where God seems to remove those things that feed our ego, those things that make being a Christian exciting. He seems to take away those material inducements to get closer to God. Okay, so that would be something that we could talk about at another time, or perhaps on a one-to-one basis. But try to realize that John of the Cross really was one who pinpointed some of these mystical states so that people would have a better idea of how God was leading them. He's weaning them away from the superficial joys of a warm-hearted session of prayer, leading them to a deeper loyalty to Christ, in spite of what's going on in the feelings, in spite of what's going on in the emotions. A famous saint of modern times, Mother Teresa, when at her death, her diaries were discovered and so forth. She had been plunged into a deep, dark night of the soul that lasted almost the last 10 years of her life. And it was a time, even for Mother Teresa, of purification and deepening. So John of the Cross, what a personality, what a life, okay? And, right at the center of things in Spain. St. Teresa died, one of the most famous women in Spain. People were involved and interested in these things at that time. St. Therese, the Little Flower, also a Carmelite, died in obscurity at only 24 years old. She became famous because of her little book, the story of a soul. So anyway, we have a chance in looking at John of the Cross to realize that we're all called to our own type of prayer. Look at yourself. Look at how you're praying. Ask yourself, am I really thinking it through? Am I praying the way the Lord wants me to? Lord, show me how I can do better. Show me how I can make a little more time for you. Show me how I can deal with distractions a little more creatively. Help me through the dark nights and maybe some of the cloudy afternoons to a place of peace and expectation and joy and hopefulness that one day we'll be reunited with you and with our friends in the company of the church, even including St. John of the Cross. Amen.